Prologue. The night I chose war. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. They never told me it would taste like ash when you finally get close enough to swallow it. I was 9 years old the first time I understood what it meant to lose everything. Not the dramatic, movie version of loss, not flames, not screaming, not blood on the floor. No. It was quieter than that. More surgical. It was a man in a tailored suit sitting across from my father at a mahogany table, sliding a single document forward with the tip of one finger, and saying, with absolutely no emotion, "Sign it, or I bury you." My father signed. And just like that, the Voss legacy, 70 years of sweat, sacrifice, and my grandfather's trembling hands building something from nothing, was transferred into the iron grip of Damien Blackwell. I watched from the crack in the study door. I watched my father's shoulders crumble inward like a building after demolition. I watched my mother press her knuckles to her mouth to muffle the sound of a cry she had no right to release in front of the man who had just swallowed us whole. And I watched Damien Blackwell stand, button his jacket, and leave without looking back. Not once. He didn't look back because we were already nothing to him. We were a transaction. A line in a ledger. A company absorbed and a family quietly erased. 23 years old. That is how old I am when I get the call that my father has died. The doctors call it heart failure. I call it Damien Blackwell. My mother stopped speaking after the company fell. My brother left the country chasing ghosts of a life he could have had. And my father, my proud, gentle, broken father, spent 14 years drinking himself slowly into the ground, unable to look at himself in any mirror because every reflection reminded him of the day he surrendered. The day Damien Blackwell made him surrender. I stand at my father's grave in the rain, and I make a promise to the cold, wet earth. I don't cry. I stopped crying about Damien Blackwell a long time ago. Tears are wasted currency. I need something harder. Something that cuts. I need proximity. I need access. I need his trust. I need to be inside the walls before I burn them down. 3 months later, when word reaches me through carefully cultivated channels that Damien Blackwell, widower, feared business titan, Ruthless alpha, is quietly seeking a wife through a discreet arrangement, I don't hesitate. I call the number. I present myself. I smile the way my mother taught me before the world ruined her, bright, warm, convincing. And I become exactly what Damien Blackwell thinks he needs. What he doesn't know, what no one knows, is that I have spent 5 years preparing for this. 5 years studying him, his company, his weaknesses, his pressure points. 5 years building a version of myself that could walk into the lion's den and make the lion believe she was tame. I am not tame. I am Emery Voss. And I am coming for everything he took. But first, there are 3 children standing between me and my plan. 3 wild, wounded, ferocious little wolves who have already destroyed 4 women before me. And something I did not account for, something I will not understand until it is far too late to stop it. Sometimes the mission changes you before you can complete it. This is not the story I plan to tell. But it is the one that is true. Chapter 1. A deal sealed in venom. Emery. The Blackwell estate sat at the end of a private road flanked by iron-black trees, their bare branches clawing upward like hands frozen mid-reach. It was October, and the kind of gray that felt personal, the kind that settled into your lungs and made breathing feel like a small act of defiance. I had driven past it once before, years ago, just to look. Just to remind myself what I was working toward. Now I was driving toward the front gate with a garment bag in my back seat and 5 years of carefully concealed fury folded neatly behind my sternum. The gate opened before I reached it. Of course it did. They were expecting me. The housekeeper, a stout woman named Mrs. Pryor, whose expression suggested she had outlasted many people's expectations and had no intention of softening for mine, led me through a foyer that could have swallowed my entire childhood apartment. Everything was expensive. Everything was cold. There were no photographs on the walls. No artwork that suggested warmth or memory. Only architectural lines, dark wood, and the kind of silence that lives in houses where people have stopped talking to each other. "Mr. Blackwell will see you in the study," Mrs. Pryor said without looking at me. "He asks that you be brief. He has calls." Of course he has calls. Damien Blackwell always has calls. The world does not stop turning simply because a woman has arrived to discuss becoming his wife. I followed her up a staircase that curved like a spine and down a hallway lined with closed doors. Behind one of them, I heard the low thud of something being knocked over, followed by a burst of sharp laughter, two voices, young, conspiratorial, that vanished as quickly as it came. The twins. Remy and Rafe. 7 years old, according to my research. Tornado grade. I filed the sound away and kept walking. Damien Blackwell was standing at the window when I entered the study. I had seen photographs. I had watched footage, board meeting recordings, a single interview from 4 years ago where he dispatched every question with the efficiency of someone who had decided in advance that no one in the room was worth his full attention. I thought I had prepared myself for the reality of him. I had not, quite. He was taller than I'd calculated. Which was an absurd thing to notice, but there it was. Broad-shouldered in a way that made the tailored jacket look almost casual. Dark hair slightly longer than boardroom expected, as though he'd missed a recent appointment and hadn't particularly cared. He hadn't turned yet, and I used those 3 seconds to compose myself, to press every feeling down beneath the surface until all that remained was the version of me I had built for this room. Calm. Composed. Precisely appealing in the way I'd calculated he would respond to. Not desperate, not dazzling. Just steady. Reliable. Safe. Everything that Emery Voss, in reality, was not. Miss Voss. He turned. His eyes were gray. Not the warm gray of winter skies or the soft gray of old photographs. These were the gray of slate, flat, mineral, utilitarian. The kind of eyes that processed rather than felt. I had expected that too, and yet the full force of being looked at by Damien Blackwell was something that required a moment of internal recalibration. He looked at people the way other men looked at contracts, searching for flaws, for exit clauses, for the fine print that would allow him to walk away. I smiled. Measured. Warm enough to read as genuine, controlled enough to read as contained. "Mr. Blackwell. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Sit down." Not a question. Not even a courtesy. He said it the way someone says close the door, functional, immediate, already past it. I sat. The terms had been outlined in advance through his lawyer and mine, a mutual acquaintance I had spent 18 months carefully positioning in his orbit. Marriage of arrangement. 2 years, with extension clause. I would manage his household and present as his wife at social obligations. He would provide financial security and access. A business transaction. That was how he had described it. A transaction. I had nearly laughed when I read the word. The man defined his entire life in transactions. He had no idea that I was the most expensive one he would ever make. "I have a few additional conditions," Damien said, settling into the chair across from me without any of the social performance that most men employed when they wanted something. No leaning forward. No manufactured warmth. He simply sat, and the room rearranged itself around him the way rooms did for certain kinds of men. "I want them addressed before we proceed." "Of course," I said. He opened a folder, physical, not digital, which I noted, and placed 3 photographs on the desk between us. I recognized them immediately, though I kept my expression neutral. Remy. Rafe. Zara. The twins grinned up at the camera in the way that children grin when they know they are about to be a problem. Zara, 14, dark-eyed, her mother's cheekbones, her father's iron in her jaw. Stared at the lens as though she was already judging whoever would eventually hold the photograph. "My children," Damien said, as though I did not know. They are not negotiable. They are not manageable. 4 women have left this house in 2 months because of them, and I will not have you waste my time by being the 5th. Something flickered in his expression then. Not emotion, exactly, more the ghost of it. A compression around his jaw that came and went like a door briefly opened. They are, he paused. Chose the word with visible care. Damaged. They do not trust easily, and they will not make it easy for you to try. I looked at the photographs for a long moment. Damaged. What an interesting choice of word from a man who had spent decades damaging everything within his reach without appearing to notice. I understand, I said. I don't think you do. Not yet. His gray eyes held mine. But I require someone who will stay. Someone who will be present and consistent for them, regardless of what they throw at her. I cannot offer you affection, Miss Boss. I cannot offer you warmth or romance or whatever it is women generally expect from this arrangement. I can offer you security, respect, and the fulfillment of every term in this contract. In return, I need someone who will not run. There was something underneath the words. Buried so far down that I almost missed it, almost. A man who had learned that everyone ran. Who had arranged his entire life around the expectation of absence. I filed that away too. I won't run, I said. And for the first time in this entire carefully constructed performance, I meant it completely, though not for the reasons he would have assumed. I would not run. I would walk every inch of this house. I would learn every corridor, every closed door, every pressure point. I would stay until I had exactly what I came for. And then, I would make sure Damien Blackwell understood, in the most complete and irreversible way possible, exactly what it cost to take something that wasn't his. We signed the papers that evening. His hand moved across the contract with the same efficient finality I remembered from the crack in my father's study door 14 years ago. The same suit, essentially. The same lack of hesitation. The same absolute certainty that the world would bend to accommodate whatever he had decided. I signed beneath his signature. My hand was steady. When it was done, he stood and extended his hand across the desk. A handshake. Of course. Not a gesture of welcome, a gesture of completion. Deal closed. File filed. Move on. I took his hand. His grip was firm and brief, and when our eyes met across the mahogany, the same mahogany, I realized with a jolt that nearly cracked my composure, the same dark wood as my father's ruined study. Something passed between us that I couldn't entirely categorize. He looked at me as though he was trying to find the fine print. I looked at him and thought, I have already found yours. I was almost out of the study when it happened. The door to the hallway burst open, not knocked, burst, and 2 small, ferocious bodies exploded into the room at a velocity that suggested they had been running since birth and had no plans to stop. Behind them, an exasperated voice called from somewhere down the hall, Remy. Rafe. I swear to every. They skidded to a halt when they saw me. 2 identical faces, sandy-haired, sharp-eyed, wearing matching expressions of assessment that were uncomfortably similar to their fathers, looked me up and down with the focused intensity of small animals deciding whether something was prey or predator. Remy. The one with the scab on his chin, which matched his file's description of a child who had recently launched himself off a shed roof, for science, apparently, crossed his arms. Are you the new wife? He demanded. Remy. Damien's voice carried exactly 1 degree of warning. What? Everyone is wondering. Rafe, quieter than his brother, but watching me with eyes that missed absolutely nothing, tilted his head slightly to the left and said, with great seriousness. The last one cried in the kitchen. Rafe. It is true. I looked at the twins. They looked at me. The hallway stretched quiet behind them, and somewhere further in the house, I heard the almost inaudible sound of a third presence, a careful, deliberate stillness that I recognized as someone old enough to know better than to burst in, but young enough to still be desperate to know. Zara. Listening from somewhere she thought was out of sight. I crouched down to the twins' level. Which I could see from the slight widening of Remy's eyes was not what he had expected, and I said, in the same tone I might use to discuss something of mutual importance. I don't cry in kitchens. And yes, for what it's worth, I'll be around for a while. Remy squinted. How long is a while? Long enough to figure each other out. A beat. Rafe looked at his brother. Something wordless passed between them, the private language of twins, compressed and rapid. Then Remy uncrossed his arms, and with all the gravitas of a 7-year-old rendering a verdict, announced. We'll see. It was, I would later understand, the closest thing to a welcome that the Blackwell children had offered anyone in a very long time. That night, in the guest room that smelled of cedar and careful distance, I lay on top of the covers with my phone face down and stared at the ceiling. I had a plan. A 5-year plan, compressed now into 2, with contingencies mapped and exit routes memorized. I had a job to do and every reason to do it. I thought about the look on Damien Blackwell's face when he said the word damaged. I thought about Rafe's serious eyes, and the ghost of Zara behind the door, and the way Remy had uncrossed his arms. I thought about my father's shoulders, crumbling inward. Then I pressed all of that back down where it belonged, turned off the lamp, and told myself what I had been telling myself for 5 years. Don't feel. Don't deviate. Don't forget why you're here. Outside, the October wind moved through the iron-black trees, and the Blackwell estate settled into its nightly silence, deep and practiced and full of things no one had found the words for yet. I closed my eyes. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Chapter 2. The 3 Little Wolves. Emery. I had been in the Blackwell house for exactly 6 days before the war began in earnest. The first 2 days were a careful ceasefire, the kind where both sides are still mapping the terrain. Remy and Rafe observed me from doorways and around corners, always in motion, always just at the edge of my peripheral vision. Like small, sandy-haired satellites in erratic orbit. They hadn't done anything yet. They were still deciding. Zara did not observe. Zara simply was not there. She moved through the house like smoke, present only in the evidence she left behind. A mug left on the wrong shelf. A door that had been open in the morning and was closed by afternoon. Footsteps above my bedroom at 11 p.m. that stopped the moment I shifted in my bed. She was 14 and furious and very, very good at being invisible. I recognized the skill. I had built the same one, once. The campaign against me opened on a Tuesday, at breakfast, with a bowl of orange juice. I had come downstairs at 7, early enough to establish routine, late enough not to appear anxious, and found Remy and Rafe already seated at the kitchen island with the particular stillness of children who have been waiting. Not patiently. Strategically. Good morning, I said. The orange juice is for you, Rafe said, pointing to a glass at the end of the counter. It was delivered with such neutrality that a less prepared person might have accepted it. I looked at the glass. Then at Rafe. Then at Remy, who was studying the ceiling with an intensity usually reserved for the Sistine Chapel. I picked up the glass, held it to the light, and observed the faint shimmer of something granular that had not quite dissolved. Salt? I asked. Rafe blinked. Remy's ceiling examination became more determined. Or was it sugar? I set the glass down, moved to the cupboard, and found the actual orange juice. Easy to mix them up. I poured myself a glass and sat down across from them. What do you want for breakfast? A long pause. You're not angry? Remy asked. He sounded genuinely confused by this, which told me the 4 women before me had responded very differently. Should I be? Mrs. Calloway cried. I told you, Rafe said to his brother, with the calm of someone collecting evidence. She's different. We'll see, Remy said. Which I was beginning to understand was his default position on all matters of significance. I made scrambled eggs. Nobody threw anything. I counted it as a win. By day 4, they had escalated. My shampoo was replaced with something that turned my hair faintly green, not enough to be obvious, just enough to be noticed in certain lights. My laptop charger was hidden inside the piano bench. A very realistic rubber spider was placed inside my left shoe, which I discovered while standing and which required a significant internal effort not to react to visibly. I found the charger, quietly colored my hair back, and left the rubber spider on Remy's pillow with a small note that said, "You dropped this." I heard the laughter from 2 floors up. Bright, shocked, unguarded, the kind of laughter that happens before the body remembers it's supposed to be on guard. I stood in the hallway and let myself feel it, just for a moment. Then I went back to learning the house. It was Zara who presented the real challenge. Not because she was cruel, though she could be, in that precise, surgical way that only teenagers who have been genuinely hurt can manage. But because she was so relentlessly, expertly absent that engaging with her felt like trying to hold water. She was 14 and she had not spoken more than 11 words to me across 6 days. I had counted. I knew, from the research I'd done before coming here, that Zara Blackwell had been 8 years old when her mother left. Not died, left. Walked out of this house on a February morning and did not come back. There had been no funeral to give the grief a shape, no tragedy to explain the absence. Just a woman who had decided that the cost of staying was too high and had made her exit without looking back. Just like her father, in that particular way. Zara had been the one to find the empty wardrobe. I knew this because it was in a file I had obtained through means I would not examine too closely, and I had read it once and then put it somewhere I could not access easily, because some pieces of information had weight that made the rest of the plan harder to carry. I did not approach Zara directly. I had learned, from watching animals and difficult people, that a direct approach only activated defenses. Instead, I did what I had always done with things that required patience. I made myself present without making myself a demand. The break came on day 8, at 11:30 at night. I had developed insomnia since arriving, not unusual, given the circumstances, and had taken to reading in the kitchen, where the light was good and the silence had a different quality than it did in my room. Less like absence. More like rest. I heard her on the stairs before I saw her. The third step creaked in a way that I had already mapped, and there was a pause, the pause of someone who had not expected to find the kitchen occupied. I did not look up from my book. After a moment, Zara came into the kitchen. She went to the refrigerator. She poured herself a glass of water with the deliberate efficiency of someone performing a task that definitely had nothing to do with the person sitting at the counter. I turned a page. She did not leave. The silence stretched. Not uncomfortable, exactly, but taut. Like a note held too long. Then, without turning around, "What are you reading?" Her voice was lower than I expected. Controlled in the way that voices are controlled when the person speaking them has had to practice not letting things out. I held up the cover. Nabokov. Probably not what you'd expect. A pause. Why? Because most people who come here bring self-help books. I've noticed the shelf in the hallway. Something shifted in her posture. Almost imperceptible. Almost. Those were theirs, she said. Flat. Final. The sentence was a door slamming. I nodded and looked back at my book. I know. She stood there for another moment, long enough that I felt the weight of it, and then she went back upstairs. But she did not go back to being smoke. The next morning, she was at the breakfast table when I came down. She did not speak to me. But she was there. I understood the difference. By the end of the second week, a fragile, unspoken geometry had begun to form. Remy talked constantly, at me, around me, sometimes apparently to the room in general, in a stream of commentary about things he had observed, hypotheses he had developed, grievances he was cataloging. He had opinions about everything and the confidence of someone who had never been told those opinions were unwelcome. I listened. I asked questions. I did not pretend to agree when I didn't. That, I think, was what surprised him most. The not pretending. Rafe was different, quieter, more interior. He watched things the way certain animals watch things, with a quality of attention that made you feel seen even when he'd said nothing. He drew in a sketchbook that he kept close and angled away, and one afternoon I found a page he'd left on the kitchen counter, not by accident, I suspected, with a small, precise drawing of me reading. He'd gotten the posture right. And the expression. I left a note beside it that said, "The proportions are excellent." The sketchbook was never angled away from me again after that. There was a moment, at the end of the second week, that I was not prepared for. It was Sunday. Damien was in his study, as he was most Sundays, as he was most days, sealed away behind that door with his calls and his transactions and his careful, practiced distance. The children and I had somehow ended up in the garden after lunch. Not by plan, exactly, but by the particular gravity of 3 children who were running out of reasons to be inside. Remy had been attempting to explain to me the aerodynamic principles behind his shed roof experiment, and I had been listening with genuine interest, because the engineering logic was actually sound even if the execution had been catastrophic, when Rafe picked up a handful of dead leaves and dropped them on his brother's head. Remy retaliated immediately. Within 40 seconds, it had escalated into something that could not technically be called a leaf fight but that definitely involved leaves. And some mud. And the kind of helpless, full-body laughter that doesn't care what it looks like. I was still sitting on the garden step, watching, when something made me look up. Zara was standing at the edge of the garden, halfway between the house and where her brothers were now rolling in leaves with the abandon of people who had completely forgotten to be careful. She was watching them with an expression that cracked something in me quietly. Longing. Pure, unguarded, 14-year-old longing. Not for the leaves, or the laughter specifically, for permission. The kind of permission that no one had thought to give her, because everyone assumed she was too old, or too cool, or too damaged to want it. I said nothing. I simply shifted slightly on the step, making room. She sat down beside me. We watched her brothers make complete fools of themselves in the garden, and neither of us spoke, and it was the best 11 minutes of my first 2 weeks in that house. I did not think about the plan. I thought about it afterward, of course. Reminded myself why I was there. Rebuilt the careful architecture. But for 11 minutes, sitting on a cold garden step next to a girl who was learning to want things again, I forgot entirely. Chapter 3. Cracks in the Stone. Damien. I had learned, early in my life, that observation was power. Not the loud kind of power, not the kind that announced itself and demanded acknowledgement. The quiet kind. The kind that came from watching while others assumed they were not being watched, from reading the room before anyone else had decided what the room meant. My father had taught me this. He had not intended to. He had taught me by being a man who never watched anything carefully and had lost everything because of it. The lesson was the same, regardless of the direction it came from. I watched. And what I was watching, over the 3 weeks since Emery Voss had walked through my front gate with a garment bag and a handshake that did not waver, was something I did not have an immediate category for. She had not cried in the kitchen. I knew this because Mrs. Pryor, who had been with this household for 11 years and who had, through that tenure, developed opinions about everything that occurred within these walls, reported it to me with the tone of someone revising a long-held assumption. She found the orange juice, Mrs. Pryor said. Made the boys scrambled eggs. Didn't make a fuss. I had said nothing. But I had noted it. The ones before her had made fusses. Understandably. Remy and Rafe had a gift for identifying the specific vulnerabilities of people placed in authority over them and applying pressure to those points with the focused enthusiasm of small scientists. The fuss was almost always the beginning of the end. Once they had made you cry, or shout, or leave the room, once they had found the crack, it was only a matter of time. Emery Voss did not crack. She found the rubber spider and returned it. She replaced her green-tinted hair with the serene efficiency of someone who had simply ticked an item off a list. When Rafe hid her keys inside the piano bench on a Thursday morning, making her 20 minutes late to an appointment she had not explained to me, she came home that afternoon and taught him a card trick. I watched her teach him the card trick from the upper hallway. I told myself I was passing by. This was not entirely true. The Zara question was the one that occupied me most. My daughter had not spoken willingly to anyone in this house, other than her brothers, in the private language they had built between the three of them, in a very long time. She had been 8 years old when her mother left, and she had spent the 6 years since constructing a version of herself that needed nothing from no one. I respected this, in the abstract, the way one respects a well-built fortification. I also knew, in the way that knowing things about your children sometimes arrived too late and with too much weight, that the fortification had a cost. She was 14 and lonely and too proud to admit it. I had tried, in the ways I knew how. Which were, I was aware, limited. I was not a man built for the particular kind of presence that children required, the warm, consistent, undemanding kind. I had built my life around transactions and outcomes. Children were not transactions. They were something else. Something I had never entirely learned the language of. Their mother had been the language. And then she had left, and I had been standing in a house where 3 children needed something from me that I didn't know how to give, and I had handled it the only way I knew, by providing everything I could quantify and hoping the rest would arrange itself. It had not arranged itself. What it had done, on an evening in the 3rd week of Emery Voss's residence in my house, was this. Zara sat beside her at the kitchen counter and shared a silence that lasted, by my count, 11 minutes. I know because I timed it. From the hallway, through the half-open door, because I had been passing by. Which was not entirely true. Zara had not shared a silence with anyone in years. She shared silences with her brothers because she had no choice, they were part of her in the way that breathing was part of her. With everyone else, her silences were weapons. Walls. The particular closed quality of someone who had decided in advance that company was a threat. This silence was different. I stood in the hallway for 11 minutes, and I did not know what to do with what I was feeling. So I went back to my study and called my CFO and talked about Q4 projections for 45 minutes until the feeling went somewhere I could not easily locate it. She cooked on Thursdays. This had not been part of the arrangement, Mrs. Pryor handled the household meals with the authority of someone who considered the kitchen her sovereign territory, but Emery had, by some negotiation I had not been present for, secured Thursday evenings. The first Thursday, she made jollof rice. From scratch, with the particular focused attention of someone who had decided that this task mattered. I smelled it from my study, the warmth of it, the spice. And found myself standing in my own kitchen doorway at 6:30 in the evening, which was not something I did. Remy was sitting on the counter, which was also not something that was allowed, talking at a velocity that suggested he had been talking for some time and had no intention of stopping. Rafe was at the table with his sketchbook, drawing something I could not see from the door. And Emery was at the stove with her back to me, adding something to the pot, responding to Remy's monologue with the easy, half-attentive murmurs of someone who was both listening and not listening in exactly the right proportions. She had learned him already. 3 weeks, and she had already learned the specific rhythm of Remy, when to engage and when to let him run, when to ask the question that redirected and when to let the theory exhaust itself. For caregivers before her, women who had come with qualifications and references and good intentions, had never managed it. They had either overengaged, which created a feedback loop of escalating performance, or underengaged, which Remy interpreted as dismissal and met with increasingly dramatic bids for attention. Emery did neither. She just knew. I did not announce myself. I went back to my study. I ate dinner with them that Thursday evening, which was not something I usually did on Thursdays. Remy told me at length about a hypothesis he was developing regarding the load-bearing capacity of the garden wall. Rafe showed me a drawing he had made of the kitchen, with Emery at the stove, her back to the viewer, steam rising from the pot. It was, for a 7-year-old, startlingly precise. Emery sat at the far end of the table and served rice and said very little, and I found myself, twice, looking at her when she was not looking at me. I noted this. Filed it without a category. Moved on. The meeting that changed things happened on a Friday, in my study, at her request. She had knocked, 2 precise knocks, the knock of someone who had decided in advance what she was going to say and was not going to waste time performing uncertainty about it. I told her to come in. She sat down across from my desk with the particular posture of someone who was completely comfortable and also completely alert, which was a combination I did not encounter often. Most people who sat across from me in that chair were one or the other. Comfortable and careless, or alert and tense. The combination was unusual. Zara needs a different school, she said, without preamble. I looked up from the document I had been pretending to read since she sat down. Excuse me? St. Catherine's is wrong for her. The environment is too competitive in the specific way that shuts her down rather than challenges her. She's not struggling academically, she's disengaged. There's a difference. She placed a folder on my desk. Not aggressively. Just, there. I've done some research. There are 3 schools within reasonable distance that I think would suit her better. I've included my reasoning. I looked at the folder. I did not open it. You've been here 3 weeks, I said. I know. Her teachers have been her teachers for 2 years. I know that too. And they've filed 3 reports in those 2 years noting her disengagement, and all 3 were sent to you, and, she paused, with the careful restraint of someone who had decided not to complete a sentence that would not help her argument. The folder has the reports in it, if you'd like to read them. She had included his own unread reports in the folder. I stared at the folder for a moment. Is there anything else? I asked. Remy needs an outlet. He's engineering-brained and he's bored, and bored Remy becomes a project manager of chaos. There's a robotics club at the community center on Saturday mornings. She stood, straightened her jacket with the one small, precise movement that I had begun to recognize as the thing she did when she had finished saying what she came to say. That's all. She left. I opened the folder. The teacher's reports were there. I had not read them. I had received them, filed them, and proceeded, because receiving and filing was what I did with information that required a response I didn't know how to give. I read them now. All 3. Then I sat in my study for a long time, looking at the window that faced the garden, where nothing was happening and everything was very quiet. I was not a man who experienced guilt easily. I had arranged my life, in part, to avoid it. But guilt, I was learning, did not require easy access. It simply arrived, when it had enough evidence, and settled in with the calm permanence of a tenant who knew their rights. I called 3 schools the following Monday. Zara was enrolled in the one Emery had marked with a small asterisk and a note that said, Best Arts Program, Strongest Pastoral Care, she needs someone to notice her before she needs someone to teach her. I signed Remy up for the robotics club. He destroyed his first robot on day 2 and had, by all accounts, been radiant about it. I did not tell Emery I had done these things. I did not know why, exactly. Except that telling her felt like acknowledging something I was not ready to name, that the woman I had hired as a fixture for my house was seeing things in my children that I had failed to see, and that this did not make me angry. It made me something else entirely. I found her in the library on a Wednesday evening, 3.5 weeks in. The library was a room I used rarely, it had been my father's, and it had the quality of rooms that absorb the character of the person who inhabited them longest. She was sitting in the leather chair by the window, my chair, technically, though I could not recall the last time I had sat in it, with her legs folded under her and a book open in her lap and a glass of something amber on the side table. She looked up when I came in. She did not move from the chair. This, I thought, was interesting. Every person who had ever been in this house, staff, associates, the various women who had come before her, adjusted their posture when I entered a room. Sat straighter, or stood, or in some way acknowledged the shift in the room's authority structure. It was unconscious, mostly. But it happened. Emery looked up, acknowledged me with a nod, and looked back at her book. As though I had simply entered a shared space, and that was all. I found myself, against my better judgment, sitting down in the chair across from her. "What are you reading?" I asked. I was not sure why. It was the question Zara had asked, I remembered, that first night in the kitchen. She held up the spine. "Dostoevsky." "Specific choice for a Wednesday evening," I said. "The Brothers Karamazov," she said. I reread it when I need to remember that complicated people are still people. There was something in the sentence, a quality of deliberate neutrality, that landed with more precision than a direct statement would have. I looked at her. She was looking at the page. "Do you find that necessary often?" I asked. She considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "More lately." The fire in the grate made the only sound in the room for a while. Outside, the wind moved through the iron-black trees. Somewhere upstairs, I could hear the faint, rhythmic sound of Remy doing something that probably required adult supervision. "You enrolled Zara in the new school," she said. Not an accusation. Not a thank you. Simply, a noting. The reports were persuasive. "She came home last Thursday and told Rafe the art teacher is extraordinary." She used the word extraordinary. "Do you know how many words Zara uses per day on average?" I did not. The fact that I did not sat between us with some weight. 11, at a minimum. Usually around 40. Last Thursday she used 412. I counted. I looked at her. "You counted?" She looked back at me with the level, gray steady gaze that I had begun to notice was her default, not defiant, not soft. Just, present. Utterly, inconveniently present. "She matters," Emery said simply. "So yes." I counted. I did not have a response to this. I had not been prepared for it, which was not a condition I was accustomed to. We sat in the library for another 20 minutes, not quite reading, not quite talking, in the particular silence of two people who have reached the edge of something and are not yet ready to look down. When she stood to go, she set her glass on the tray by the door with the same unhurried precision with which she did everything. "Good night, Damien," she said. My first name. Not Mr. Blackwell. Not the formal distance of the arrangement. She said it easily, as though it were simply true. I sat in the library for a long time after she had gone, in my father's chair that she had been sitting in, with the fire going low and the wind in the trees and the distant sound of my children moving through the house above me. And for the first time in a very long time, the house did not feel like a transaction. Chapter 4. The Truth That Burns. Emery. It was Zara who found the file. I had been careful. 5 years of careful. Every document encrypted, every note written in a shorthand that belonged only to me, every plan stored in layers that would require intention and knowledge to penetrate. I had been careful the way someone is careful when they know exactly what they stand to lose if they are not. But I had not accounted for a 14-year-old who could not sleep, who had inherited her father's precise, relentless mind, and who had taken to sitting in the library at odd hours because it was the room in the house that felt most like the version of home she was slowly, cautiously beginning to believe in. I had left my laptop on the library desk. Just once. Just for 20 minutes, while I went to help Remy locate a component he had somehow lost inside the piano. Don't ask, he had a theory, and when I came back, Zara was standing by the desk with the look of someone who had seen something they could not unsee. The folder was open on the screen. The one I had labeled, in my private shorthand, BWX Origin. She had decoded the shorthand. Of course she had. She was her father's daughter in every way that mattered. Blackwell acquisition, she said. Her voice was very quiet. Voss Legacy Holdings. Hostile Takeover, 2010. She looked up at me. That's your name? Voss. The room went still. I had rehearsed this moment, once, at the beginning, in the way that you rehearse things you hope will never happen. I had a speech prepared. Measured, rational, designed to contain the damage. I opened my mouth to deliver it. Nothing came. Because Zara was looking at me with the particular expression of someone who has just had their most carefully constructed belief dismantled in real time, and that expression was not anger. It was something so much worse than anger. It was the face of a girl who had started to trust again, and who was now watching that decision turn to ash in her hands. You came here because of him, she said. Not a question. I said nothing. Which was, of course, its own answer. All of it. Her voice cracked, once, and then she sealed it. She had learned that from him too, the ceiling. The school. The robotics club. The Thursday dinners. The garden. All of it was. No, I said. And then, because it was the only true thing I had left, not all of it. But she was already gone. The sound of Zara's door closing at the top of the stairs was not loud. She did not slam it. She closed it with the quiet, deliberate finality of someone who had had practice at controlled exits. She had learned that from watching her mother, I thought. And from watching her father. And now she was learning it again, watching me. I sat down in the library chair. My chair. The one I had taken as my own without asking, the way I had taken so many things in this house without fully realizing I was doing it. I thought about the plan. The plan was still intact. The documents I had gathered over 5 years, the evidence of the pressure Damien had applied to my father, the deliberate engineering of the company's collapse, the paper trail I had followed obsessively from ledger to ledger, lawyer to lawyer, were all still there. I had what I came for. I had access, proximity, trust. I had the inside view of Blackwell Industries that no journalist or regulator had ever managed to obtain. All I had to do was use it. I sat in the chair for a long time, and I thought about my father's shoulders. I thought about the rain at his grave. I thought about the 9-year-old watching through the crack in a door. And then I thought about Remy explaining aerodynamic theory with the serious passion of someone who had never once been told his ideas were too big. I thought about Rafe's sketchbook, turned toward me now, full of careful drawings of a house that had begun, slowly, to look like a home. I thought about Zara on the garden step, and in the kitchen at midnight, and in the library with a borrowed book pressed to her chest like a thing she was not yet ready to put down. I thought about Damien in the library, asking what I was reading. Filing things without categories. Calling schools he should have called 2 years ago. I pressed my hands flat on my knees. The plan had always assumed that the people in this house would remain objects. Obstacles or instruments. Things to be navigated around or through. They had refused to be objects. The problem with people, I had failed to account for, was that they insisted on being people. Damien came to find me at 7 that evening. I had not moved from the library. I had been sitting there long enough that the light had shifted from afternoon gold to early dark, and the fire had gone from unnecessary to necessary, and at some point Mrs. Pryor had left a cup of tea on the table beside me without a word, which was its own kind of language. He came in without knocking, which he never did. He stood in the doorway for a moment, reading the room the way he always did. Efficient, complete, missing nothing. Then he came and sat down in the chair across from me. Zara told me, he said. I had expected anger. The cold, controlled, devastating kind that he was capable of, the kind that did not raise its voice and did not need to, because the quality of the silence around it was damage enough. What I had not expected was that he would sit down. I know, I said. The Voss acquisition. He said it the way you say the name of something you have been carrying for a long time. Your company destroyed my family, I said. Not with heat. There was no heat left. Just the flat, factual weight of it. My father spent 14 years drinking himself to death. My mother stopped speaking. My brother left and never came back. And you, I stopped. Looked at him. You don't even remember it, do you? The Voss acquisition was a line in a quarterly report. Something moved across his face. Not the ghost of feeling this time. The thing itself. I remember it, he said quietly. I stared at him. I remember your father. His name was Thomas. He had a photograph of you on his desk, a little girl in a red coat, standing in front of a building. I noticed it because he kept touching the frame during the meeting. The way people touch things when they're trying to remember what they're fighting for. He paused. I signed the papers anyway. The silence between us was enormous. Why? I asked. It came out smaller than I intended. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, it was with the particular precision of a man choosing words he had never said aloud before. Because I had been taught that business was war, and war required no conscience. Because I was 28 years old and I had been building myself into something impenetrable since I was a child, and impenetrable things do not feel the weight of what they crush. He looked at me steadily. I am not offering that as an excuse. I am offering it as the truth, because you have come here for the truth and you deserve to have it. I had rehearsed my response to his denial. To his rage. To his cold dismissal. I had not rehearsed for this. The documents I have, I said. I have enough to expose everything. The pressure campaign against my father was illegal. There are regulators who would be very interested in what I've found. I know, he said. He did not move. Use them. I blinked. What? If justice requires it, use them. His voice was level. I have spent 15 years building something that I told myself was strength. You have spent 5 years building something you told yourself was justice. Perhaps we have both been, in our own ways, wrong about what we were building. He paused. Use the documents if you must. But I would ask you, not as a condition, not as a transaction. To ask yourself first whether what you want is justice, or whether what you want is for someone to look at you and say, I see what was taken. I am sorry. It mattered. The fire crackled. Outside, somewhere above us, I heard the soft sound of footsteps, one set, then two, then three. Moving toward the top of the stairs. Stopping. The children, I thought. Listening. The way children listen when they understand that what is happening downstairs will determine the shape of things. I thought about Zara's face. The ash in her hands. It mattered, I said finally. My voice came out rough. It mattered enormously. I know, Damien said. I know it did. And I am sorry. Not the way people are sorry when they want to close a conversation. I am sorry in the way that has no convenient resolution. The kind you carry. I looked at him for a long time. At the gray eyes that I had come into this house prepared to destroy. They were the same eyes. They were also not the same eyes at all. I thought about the 9-year-old at the door. I thought about what she had wanted, really. Underneath the plan, underneath the 5 years of architecture. She had wanted someone to look back. I went upstairs at 9 o'clock. I knocked on Zara's door. 2 knocks, the way she knocked, I had learned her rhythms the way I had learned everything in this house, by paying close attention. A long pause. Then, what? Not a question. An acknowledgement. I took it. I opened the door and stood in the doorway without going further in. She was on her bed with her knees pulled up, her sketchbook open on her lap. She had taken up drawing from Rafe, or perhaps Rafe had taken it from her. It was difficult to tell which direction things flowed between those two. She did not look at me. I came here because of your father, I said. That part is true. I came here angry, and with a plan, and with every intention of using this house to finish something I started 5 years ago. She was still not looking at me. But she had stopped drawing. What is also true, I said, is that somewhere between the salted orange juice and the rubber spider and 11 minutes on a garden step, the plan stopped being the most important thing in the room. A beat. You still lied, she said. Yes. You let us think you were. She stopped. Her jaw tightened. Remy thinks you're the best person who's ever been in this house. He told Rafe. I heard him. That cracked something in me so completely that I had to look away for a moment. Zara. I said her name the way you say the name of something that matters, without decoration. I cannot undo what I was when I arrived. But I can tell you that what happened in this house, what happened with you, and your brothers, and your father, was not a performance. The caring was not part of the plan. The plan had no caring in it. She looked up at me then. Her eyes were her father's, I thought, in every way, that same quality of processing, of looking for the fine print. Looking for the thing beneath the thing. Do you love him? She asked. The directness of it knocked the air out of me. I stood in the doorway for a moment and let the question sit where she had put it, because it deserved that. Because she deserved that. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But I think I might be on the way there, which is something I did not intend and cannot entirely explain. She looked at me for a long time. Then she looked back at her sketchbook. Close the door, she said. The hallway is cold. I closed the door. I stood in the hallway with my back against the wall and my eyes closed and let the trembling that I had been holding back for 3 hours finally move through me and out. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow there would be decisions. Tomorrow the shape of things would need to be determined. Tomorrow I would have to decide what I was, and what I wanted, and whether the story I had come here to finish was the story I actually needed to tell. But tonight, behind a door she had asked me to close against the cold, Zara Blackwell was still in the same room. And for now, that was enough. Chapter 5. Chosen, not conquered. Emery and Damien. 3 days passed in a quiet that was not emptiness but excavation. I did not leave. I had thought about it, had stood at the window of my room on the first morning after with a bag half-packed and the gate code memorized, and had recognized, with the clarity that arrives only when you are standing at the precise moment of choice, that leaving would be the easiest thing I had ever done. I had never done the easiest thing. I was not going to start now. So I stayed. I made breakfast. I helped Remy rebuild the robot he had destroyed at Robotics Club. He explained, been testing structural integrity, and the data was extremely useful. I sat with Rafe while he showed me his sketchbook from beginning to end, every page, every drawing, including the ones that were only half finished, which felt like the most significant kind of trust. Zara did not avoid me. She did not seek me out either. She existed in the house the way she had in the beginning, present but careful, gauging the new weight of things. I understood this. I did the same. Damien and I saw at dinner, and once in the hallway, and once through the glass of the library door. We had not spoken since the night by the fire. There was too much in the air between us that had not yet been properly named, and both of us, I think, understood that naming required more stillness than either of us had managed yet. The conversation happened on the 4th morning, in the kitchen, at 6 a.m., before anyone else was awake. He was already there when I came downstairs. Coffee made, which was unusual. He was standing at the window looking at the garden, which had been stripped bare now by November, the trees just structure and silence. I poured myself coffee and leaned against the counter and said nothing. He turned. I had my lawyers look at the acquisition, he said. The pressure campaign against your father. They confirm what you found. I said nothing. I'm going to make it right, he said. Not with the grandeur of a man performing accountability. With the flat, functional tone of a man adding an item to a list that he has decided he is responsible for. The Voss legacy. What remains of it? What can be restored or compensated? I am going to make it right. Not because you have leverage. Because it is owed. I looked at him. You don't have to do that. I know. I'm not going to use the documents. I had made this decision sometime in the night, in the particular way that decisions arrive when you have stopped trying to force them. I thought about it. I thought about what it would accomplish, and who it would actually serve, and whether my father, the man he was before all of it, would have wanted his daughter to spend 5 years becoming a weapon. I paused. He would not have. Damien was quiet. He was a builder, I said. That's what I keep forgetting. He wasn't a fighter. He built things. He would have wanted me to build something. The kitchen was very still. Outside, a bird moved through the bare trees, just the sound of wings, there and gone. What do you want to build? Damien asked. I looked at him for a long moment. At the gray eyes, at the jaw that had softened by some small but measurable degree over the weeks I had been in this house. At the man who had called 3 schools and signed Remy up for robotics and read 3 years of unread reports in a single evening and had not told me any of it, because he was still learning how to be seen doing something good. I don't know yet, I said. The same answer I had given Zara. The only honest one I had. But I think I'd like to find out from here. If that's something that could be. I was not usually someone who ran out of sentences. Stay, he said. Simply. Without the performance of it. The same word he had used when he hired me, I thought, stay, don't run, but with an entirely different weight. Not a requirement. A request. Perhaps the first real one he had made in a very long time. Okay, I said. Remy found out first, because Remy always found out first. He came thundering into the kitchen at 7:15 with the energy of someone who had been awake since 5 and had been waiting for a socially acceptable hour to emerge. He stopped when he saw us both at the counter, standing closer than we had stood before, not touching, but in the particular proximity of people who have decided to stop maintaining distance. He looked at his father. Then at me. Then back at his father. Then he said, with the satisfied certainty of a scientist whose hypothesis has been confirmed, I knew it. Remy. Damien's voice. What? I told Rafe 3 weeks ago. He owes me £5. He poured himself an enormous glass of orange juice, the real orange juice, from the correct container, with a pointed look at me that communicated he remembered every detail of the salt incident, and sat down at the island and began constructing a theory about the structural advantages of the new school canteen, and the kitchen filled up with his voice the way it always did, warm and relentless and completely uncontainable. Rafe appeared at the doorway 10 minutes later with his sketchbook. He looked at the two of us with his quiet, precise attention, and said nothing, and then came and sat beside his brother. But before he opened his sketchbook, he reached across the counter and put his small hand briefly over mine. He patted it once. Then he opened his sketchbook and began to draw. I looked at the ceiling. I was not going to cry in the kitchen. I had made a commitment. It was very close. Zara took the longest. Not because she was reluctant. I understood, by now, that reluctance was not Zara's primary mode. Her primary mode was precision. She moved toward things carefully, deliberately, making sure of the ground before she committed her weight to it. It was a Saturday in December, 5 weeks after the night by the fire, and the house had filled with the kind of winter light that makes everything look like a painting someone made from memory. We were in the kitchen together. She had, with the casual authority of someone claiming territory, started joining me on Thursday evenings and had expanded this, without comment, to occasional Saturdays. We were making chin-chin. She had asked me to teach her, which had been phrased as, I want to learn the one with the fried dough. Which I had understood correctly. She was cutting the dough into small pieces with the focused precision of someone who takes all tasks seriously, and I was heating the oil, and neither of us was speaking, which between us had long since become its own comfortable language. Then she said, without looking up, "Were you ever going to tell us? The real reason you came?" I thought about lying. Not to protect myself, that instinct had burned away somewhere around the night by the fire. But because the truth was complicated and she was 14 and perhaps she did not need the full weight of it. Then I remembered who I was talking to. "No," I said honestly. "I wasn't. Not by choice. I had built a version of events that I was going to maintain as long as I needed to, and leave before it required examination." She was quiet for a moment, cutting with precision. "But you stayed," she said. "I stayed. Because of us? Or because of him?" I considered this with the honesty it deserved. "Both," I said. "In different ways. You first, I think. Then him. Then the two of them together made leaving feel like something I wasn't willing to do." She placed another small piece of dough on the tray. Then another. "The other one's left," she said. Not accusingly. Just as a fact. As the weight she had been carrying since she was 8 years old and found an empty wardrobe. "I know," I said. "I know they did." "You're different," she said. Still the same flat tone. Still cutting the dough. Then, quietly, "I think you might be the kind of person who stays." The oil was the right temperature. I lowered the first batch of chin-chin into it, and listened to the sound it made, that particular, domestic, enormously satisfying sound of something becoming what it is supposed to be, and I said, "I am. I'm the kind of person who stays." Zara looked up at me then, briefly, with an expression that did something to the light in the room. Then she went back to cutting the dough, and I went back to the oil, and the kitchen smelled like something warm and made from scratch, and outside the winter light moved through the iron-black trees, and the house settled around us like something that had finally, after a very long time, decided to rest. In the spring, Damien did something I had not asked for and had not expected. He found my mother. She had been living in a small flat in another city, quiet and self-contained, and he had sent a driver and a letter, not from himself, he told me later, because he understood that his name on an envelope would be the wrong beginning, but from me. A letter I had not written, which he had somehow written as me, and which contained every word I had been unable to say since my father died. She came. She arrived on a Thursday, which was my day, and she stood at the door of the Blackwell estate and looked at the iron-black trees and the cold stone and the gates, and I watched her do the calculation that I had done myself once, the measuring of a place against everything it had once represented. Then she looked at me. Then past me, at the hallway, where 3 children had gathered with the focused, barely contained energy of a welcoming committee that had been rehearsing. Remy spoke first. "Of course. You must be Emery's mum," he said, with great authority. "We've been expecting you." "I'm Remy. I'm the one with the engineering interest. Rafe draws things. Zara is the clever one, but don't tell her I said that, she'll get insufferable." "I heard that," said Zara, from the stairs. My mother looked at me. Her eyes were full of something I had not seen in them since I was 9 years old. She stepped inside. That evening, after dinner, after my mother and Zara had discovered a shared preference for a particular kind of novel and had gone to the library together with the absorbed focus of people who have found an unexpected ally, and after the twins had fallen asleep on the sitting room floor in the middle of explaining something to me, and after Damien had carried Remy upstairs and I had carried Rafe, and after the house had settled into its quiet. The good kind, the kind that came from fullness rather than absence, Damien found me on the back step. It was the same step. The one in the garden where Zara had sat beside me, all those months ago. He sat down next to me. Not across from me, not at a measured distance. Next to me, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched, close enough that the warmth of him was present and real. We looked at the garden for a while. The trees were beginning again. The first suggestions of green along the iron-black branches, tentative and certain at once. "You wrote that letter as me," I said. I wrote what you would have written, he said, if you had not spent so long teaching yourself not to ask for things. I thought about arguing with this. I decided not to. Damien. Thank you. He was quiet for a moment. Then, with the particular precision of a man who has learned, slowly and with great effort, to say the thing directly. You came here to take something from me, he said. Instead you gave my children back to me. You gave me back to them. And you gave me, he paused. A reason to be something other than what I had built myself into. I looked at him. You are the most inconvenient thing that has ever happened to me, he said. And there was something in his voice that I recognized, after all these months, as the sound of Damien Blackwell being honest in the way that cost him something. I came here as a weapon, I said. I ended up as a person. That's your fault entirely. Something crossed his face that I had never seen there before. Something unhurried and unguarded, moving through him like light through a room where the curtains have finally been opened. He laughed. Not the short, controlled acknowledgement of someone performing amusement. A real laugh, surprised, involuntary, full. The kind of laugh you cannot plan for and cannot contain. I stared at him. He covered it quickly, the way people cover things they are not used to revealing. But it had happened. It was real. I had seen it. Don't, I said. Don't what? Don't put it back. He looked at me. The last of it moved through him, unhurried now, and he let it. Above us, in the lit window of the library, I could see the silhouette of my mother and Zara, heads bent over the same book. Somewhere inside, the twins were sleeping on a sitting room floor. The garden was quiet. The trees were beginning again. His shoulder pressed against mine, and I let it, and neither of us moved. Epilogue. 6 months later, Emery. There is a photograph on the wall of the Blackwell estate now. There had not been one before. I had noticed this on my first day, the bare walls, the deliberate absence of memory, the architecture of a man who had decided that looking back was a luxury he could not afford. I had filed it away, as I filed everything in those early weeks, as information. As a pressure point. I never used it as one. The photograph was taken on a Thursday in April, in the kitchen, by nobody in particular. Rafe had set the camera on a timer and then sprinted back to the table with the focused urgency of someone who had been planning this for some time. We are all slightly blurred with motion. Remy is saying something. Zara is rolling her eyes at whatever Remy is saying, but she is also smiling, and the smile is the real one. The one she does not perform, the one that arrives without her permission and stays longer than she intends. My mother is at the end of the table, laughing at something she will later claim she cannot remember, but which she remembers exactly. Damien is looking at the camera. Most people, when they don't know a photo is being taken, look slightly unguarded. Slightly unfinished. As though the face they wear for the world requires a moment to assemble itself. Damien looks present. Just that. As though he has stopped, in this particular moment, being somewhere else. And I am looking at him. Rafe hung the photograph in the hallway without asking anyone. By the time anyone noticed, it had already been there for 3 days, and the house had already decided it belonged. The documents are in a safe that only I have access to. The evidence of the pressure campaign, the paper trail, the 5 years of architecture. I have not destroyed them. I have not used them either. Damien has spent 6 months quietly, methodically making good on what he said by the fire. The Voss holdings, what could be recovered, have been recovered. Compensation, legal and financial, has been arranged through channels that required no public exposure and no spectacle. My mother received a letter from his lawyers explaining that a trust had been established in my father's name. She called me when she received it. She did not speak for a long time. Then she said, "Your father would have found this very strange and also very correct." I agreed. He would have. Zara got into the advanced art program at her new school. She came home and told everyone at dinner, in 438 words, about the teacher's response and the other students in the program and the project she was already planning and the specific quality of the light in the studio on Tuesday afternoons. Remy built a robot that did not explode. He was significantly less excited about this outcome than about the ones that had. Rafe gave me a drawing for my birthday. It was of the garden in winter, the iron-black trees, the steppe, 2 figures sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. He had gotten the proportions exactly right. He had gotten the expression on the taller figure's face exactly right. I have it on the wall beside my bed. There are still hard days. There are days when the weight of what I carried into this house settles back onto me and I have to sit somewhere quiet and hold it for a while before I can put it down again. There are days when Damien retreats into the study and the old distance reassembles itself like weather, and I have to remember that distance is his first language and not take it as a verdict. There are days when Zara is 14 in the most complete and exhausting sense of the word, and days when the twins operate at a frequency that would challenge a saint, and days when the house is loud and complicated and nothing is where it should be. On those days, I make tea. I sit at the kitchen counter. I let the house be what it is. I used to need things to be perfect before I could feel safe in them. Controlled. Planned. I used to need to know the exit before I walked through the door. I know the exit from this house. I have always known it. I stopped needing it somewhere around the time a 7-year-old left a sketchbook open to a drawing of me, and a 14-year-old made room on a garden step, and a man in a library asked what I was reading and then sat there long after he had any practical reason to stay. It is a Thursday evening. My day. The kitchen smells like something good. My mother is at the table with Zara, and they are arguing about a book in the affectionate, pointed way of people who trust each other enough to disagree. The twins are doing something in the garden that involves a great deal of focused discussion and at least one device that Mrs. Pryor has banned twice. Damien is at the doorway of the kitchen. He has been there for about 40 seconds, which I know because I always know when he is in a room. He is watching his children, and his expression has the quality it gets when he thinks no one is observing him, open, unguarded, something close to wonder. He looks at me. I look at him. Neither of us says anything. We have learned, the two of us, that some things do not need to be said. They simply need to be seen. I turn back to the stove. He comes and stands beside me. And the house, full of noise and motion and the particular messy warmth of people who have chosen each other. Not out of convenience, not out of transaction, not out of anything except the slow, inconvenient, undeniable fact of love, goes on. I came here to take something back. I did not expect to find something better. But I have learned, this year, in this house, with these people, that the best things are rarely the ones you planned for. They are the ones that find you when you finally stop running from them.